Cheng, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Amazon gobbles up Whole Foods in a $13.7 billion deal. We are all over every angle of this stunning development, including the implications for brick and mortar stores in the grocery game as Amazon continues its trek from online to offline, why the world's e-commerce giant is diving back into the space it disrupted. Plus, the shockwaves rippling across the pond in the wake of today's announcement, why the competition should be concerned. Amazon may have a plan in the pipeline to expand its European footprint as well. First to our lead, Amazon upsets the grocery cart, agreeing to buy Whole Foods for $13.7 billion. That's $42 a share in cash for the all-organic food chain, including debt. The news sent shares of both Whole Foods and Amazon trading higher Friday and sent shockwaves across online and offline worlds. It is a highly ambitious move that gives Amazon an opportunity to dominate literally every part of a customer shopping experience. In recent years, Amazon has become a major distributor of TV shows and movies, started its own package delivery networks by land, sea, air, opened physical bookstores, and changed the future of connected homes with its AI platform Echo. Now it is taking on groceries, a massive and non-cyclical business. We all got to eat, of course. It is the biggest purchase Amazon has ever made, dwarfing the size of all its previous acquisitions by far. We're joined now by Brad Stone, our senior executive editor at Bloomberg Technology, who also wrote a book on Amazon, and Aaron Kessler, an analyst at Raymond James, who covered Amazon. Brad, I'll start with you now that you've had a few hours to let the news sink in. What is the significance of this new chapter in Amazon's history?
You know, I went back to last year's shareholder letter by Jeff Bezos, and he talked about three areas of strength: Marketplace, Prime, and AWS. And he said we are on a search for the fourth big business. Jeff Bezos has put an anchor in the ground. Food is that fourth business. They have found through 10 years of experimentation that people don't like the model of ordering online, having it delivered to your home for food, for groceries. They need to get into physical retail. This is a big bet on food, on groceries, on meal delivery.
That said, Whole Foods is a smaller player here in the U.S. It's very small in Europe. So what kind of a foothold does Amazon really have, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, I think really the Whole Foods deal is also about expediting their online process. I think Amazon struggled with Amazon Fresh. They have about 20 cities that they're in today. I think they're looking to expand that greatly, but that's big CapEx requirements for Amazon. They're looking, how do we go from 20 to a much greater number? And you get about roughly 500 stores with the Whole Foods acquisition, and probably still some expansion, but you get a much bigger footprint with basically right away.
Talk to us about the leadership behind this. Of course, Jeff Bezos, Jeff Wilke as well, who runs Amazon Consumer Worldwide, and then there's John Mackey. How do you see them actually working this whole thing out?
Yeah, it'll be a process. I mean, John Mackey will stay as CEO of Whole Foods, and of course he needed this kind of relief because he had activist shareholders that were advocating for his dismissal. But you know, so I don't know that the leadership situation will change, but I do see Amazon bringing different models to Whole Foods: order online, collect at the store, maybe moving Amazon devices into a portion of Whole Foods where customers can experiment with an Echo or an Amazon Fire, then go take it home. You know, perhaps product categories that Whole Foods hasn't introduced. I think, from the leadership perspective, though, if we look at Zappos, if we look at other acquisitions that Amazon has made, they have left the leadership teams relatively intact.
Aaron, what are the key questions you'd want to ask Amazon executives today?
Yeah, so I guess what we're getting from investors, is this really to change the traditional grocery buying experience, or is it just to improve your online platform? So that'll be the key question. Is Amazon looking to actually change the traditional grocery buying experience? They've experimented with Amazon Go in Seattle. It hasn't really been rolled out yet, but kind of more in test mode. But is that what we're going to see, more kind of an automation platform for groceries? You basically don't even have checkout people. You basically just go swipe your mobile phone and check out yourself. So is that what it's about? Or is it really also about just leveraging the Whole Foods infrastructure? And this is what Amazon struggled with on the fresh side, having that whole infrastructure set up to be able to deliver to consumers in a more cost-efficient fashion. And this, I think, helps them with that as well.
Brad, talk to us a little bit about the M&A history at Amazon. Your team had a piece out yesterday about Amazon potentially interested in buying Slack, an enterprise messaging service. I mean, what's next? One venture capitalist speculated, maybe we'll see Amazon buying autonomous vehicles next.
Well, that's interesting. Amazon, the history of M&A at Amazon has been conservative, right? They've made small deals, few, if any, over $1 billion until this point. Usually not new networks, but accelerating existing initiatives. This deal really does break the mold in a number of different ways. One that occurs to me is that Whole Foods is a kind of wounded franchise. 7 quarters of diminishing same-store sales, a brand that used to speak to the exclusivity of organic foods, but now, of course, everyone from Walmart to Kroger's is in organics. So in some ways, I don't know that the history of M&A at Amazon is a guide here. This is more akin to Jeff Bezos' personal acquisition of the Washington Post in terms of, an interesting brand, a great reputational history, but a lot needed in terms of investment and rehabilitating the company.
And also, though, does that mean he's going to be hands-off in the same way he is at Washington Post?
Probably not as much, not as much. But look, I don't know that Jeff is that hands-off at the Washington Post. He's come in and, he's given that company a lot of leeway, the money to invest and to bring a technology orientation to the newspaper. And I think the same way that he will be introducing tech in terms of payments and other things Aaron mentioned to Whole Foods.
Aaron, you also cover Alibaba, which has also been investing billions of dollars in grocery stores across the other pond. What do you make of this new battle line being drawn between Amazon and Alibaba?
Yeah, I mean, largely Amazon's been kind of U.S., Europe, India. Obviously, Alibaba is mainly focused on the Chinese market at this point. I think the difference between the markets is U.S. is a much more developed traditional retail market, whereas China is less developed traditional retail, and it's actually gone online much faster than the U.S. market, really driven by the mobile technology. So we've liked both companies fundamentally. Prefer Alibaba right now on a valuation basis, but I think both companies can do well in their respective areas.
The Amazon Echo, Brad, is another interesting piece of this puzzle. Talk to us about what that piece looks like now.
Well, as part of this 10 years of experimentation in groceries, they have been introducing hardware to accelerate the buying process, to make it easier for people to make impulse purchases from their home. That's not just the Echo, which is also a commerce engine. It's the Dash Wand, where you can scan a barcode or say something into it. It's those Dash buttons where you could press a button to reorder your Tide automatically. That is all going to work in this new context. I mean, it will take some time to tie in the systems together, but you can imagine Amazon Dash buttons for certain Whole Foods product categories. You can imagine an Echo that where somebody is asking for a certain food item or even a meal, one of those prepackaged sushi meals that Whole Foods has, or a burrito, and it appears in 15 or 20 minutes. So technology is an accelerant for the retail business, for the grocery business in particular, and here Amazon has gone and made a big bet on groceries.
To that point, Amazon's trying to create more touch points for the consumers. So I think they analyze this data. We've talked to them about it. I mean, the more you engage with one of their products, they look at the data. How much do you increase your sales? If you go to Whole Foods now, which is an Amazon property, are you going to be buying more online? So they're looking at all these touch points, whether it's Echo devices, going to Whole Foods, other areas that they control. And if you're using 3 of their products versus 4, what's the difference in how much you're consuming on Amazon?
Now, hang on. There was another big deal announcement earlier today. Walmart is buying the high-end men's retailer Bonobos for $310 million in cash. The unit will be run by Bonobos founder and CEO Andy Dunn and initially offered through Jet.com. Walmart acquired Jet.com last year, has also bought ModCloth, Moose Jaw, Shoebuy. Brad, you also did a big cover piece on Jet. What do you make of this move? And on the same day,
not a coincidence. We know Amazon well. These things are strategic, right? So it would not surprise me if they timed this announcement to shortcut Walmart's acquisition, the announcement of the long-rumored acquisition of this company. Walmart's catching up, right? And there are lots of brands, lots of apparel categories where it's weak, particularly in its online marketplace. So, Mark Lorre of Jet.com has been, and now of Walmart, has been on a mission to go fill some of these holes. This is one deal of many.
Can Walmart catch up?
Yeah, it's going to be tough to catch up to Amazon. Is there room for a number 2 and 3 player in the U.S.? Sure. But Amazon, is over $100 billion on a gross merchandise value in the U.S., multiples of the size of the next closest players, likely Walmart at this point. But sure, is there room for number 2 and 3 players that are growing quickly still? Yes, and that's going to be to offset what we likely see is a lot of declines in the traditional retail space longer term.
And different parts of the market. Amazon on the high end, Walmart, of course.
Yeah, and to that point, Amazon's looking to go low end. They just announced a lower price Prime product. We'll see if that gets adopted.
So much to talk about, obviously. Aaron Kessler, analyst at Raymond James. Brad Stone, our senior executive editor for Bloomberg Tech. Thanks so much. Coming up, how will this mega deal give Amazon access to hundreds of physical stores? We'll discuss the expansion of Amazon's footprint next. And earlier today, Bloomberg's Eric Schatzker spoke to Bruce Berkowitz, founder and CIO at Fairholme Capital Management, also on the board of struggling retailer Sears. Eric asked about what the Amazon Whole Foods deal means for the retail industry. This is Bloomberg.
The competition's extremely tough. People are going to have to find ways to become more efficient and do a better job, and we're going to see it. And we're going to have to see it with the supermarkets. You're going to have these mergers, amalgamations. It makes sense.
Disney says its $5.5 billion theme park in Shanghai is close to breaking even after just its first full year of operations. Speaking to Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie in Shanghai, CEO Bob Iger says it's a feat none of Disney's resorts have been able to achieve in the last 30 years.
We did say that we hope to break even. I can confirm that we will. We're now close enough to the end of, today is actually the end of the first full year of business, and this will break even. That's also an extraordinary achievement. I'm not sure that we've ever done that. We certainly haven't done it in the last 30 years for a new theme park.
Let's return now to our top story, Amazon's blockbuster $13.7 billion deal to buy Whole Foods. This acquisition will likely disrupt not just grocers, but the overall retail industry. Here to talk about the impact on brick and mortar, we are joined by Bloomberg News' Matt Townsend, who covers the retail space. So let's start with retail groceries. Yeah. What does this mean for other grocers with physical stores?
Well, it's obviously not good. I mean, if you look at the stocks of companies that sell out of groceries, Walmart, Target, Kroger, they all collapsed today. Actually, Walmart stock was down the most since 2015. So it's not good. I mean, obviously, the market's predicting that they're going to be taking share potentially with Amazon investing in sprucing up the operations of Whole Foods. Another thing to think about is, if you look at the Whole Foods shopper, it's a upper middle class to wealthy shopper, and those are the most coveted shoppers out there. So if they can sort of latch on to these customers, potentially take them into the Amazon sort of ecosystem and get them to spend more money with Amazon on apparel and other parts of the consumer world, that would be a hit to retailers as well.
Poonam Goyal of Bloomberg Intelligence wrote, this now opens up an opportunity for more clicks going bricks.
Yeah.
Amazon buying Whole Foods gets its physical presence into grocery. Could apparel be next? We know that Amazon has been making its own apparel, still a very, very small part of the business. But what do you think of that?
Yeah, that's been speculated for a long time, too. I mean, I've been covering retail for a number of years now, and there was always a speculation about when's Amazon, not if, but when is Amazon going to get into brick and mortar retail? And they did it with grocery first, obviously, so, and they're dipping their toes with books. So, there is a speculation about apparel, and there's plenty of opportunities for them to pick up a distressed retailer, or maybe a retailer that is not necessarily distressed, but hit a rough patch. I mean, look at J.Crew, look at Gap. All these sort of mall-based apparel chains aren't doing that well right now. So that's definitely something that's out there. It seems like they potentially have their hands full right now with the Whole Foods acquisition, but we'll see. So it could happen.
So maybe they're busy, but we just spoke about Walmart buying Jet and Bonobos. What's to stop Amazon from buying a company like Target?
I guess knowing Jeff Bezos and his track record, maybe nothing, but, could they take on more debt? I guess they could. I mean, there was some speculation that they might get downgraded with the debt they're taking on for Whole Foods. But, I wouldn't put anything past Amazon and its ambitions. I guess at this point, it's if they can make Whole Foods work, make that a proof point, they could convince investors that it'd be a good idea to go after another brick and mortar chain.
Now, Amazon has been rolling out its own brick and mortar locations, Amazon Go. They've also got the grocery line, Amazon Fresh. What happens to the brand here when it comes to Amazon Fresh, Amazon Go, and Whole Foods? Yeah,
that's sort of a big question mark as well. I mean, I was talking to some people today. They thought, the 365 brand, which is the Whole Foods private label, like that potentially could be Amazon's big private label brand going forward because it already has name recognition. It's pretty well known. But what happens to these other platforms and sort of channels remains to be seen. But some analyst reports I was reading today, they basically thought it was just an add-on, that they would still keep a lot of these Amazon Go, Amazon Fresh, the pickup, so Amazon Pantry, So it could just be another, addition to this Amazon ecosystem attacking the grocery market, which is obviously a big, ambitious project for Bezos.
A lot of question marks. Matt Townsend, who covers retail for Bloomberg News in New York, thanks so much for joining us. Coming up, we check out the global impact of Amazon's big bet on groceries, how European retailers can stem the tide. And earlier, David Rubenstein of the Carlyle Group spoke to Bloomberg and gave a positive outlook on this deal and the leadership of Jeff Bezos. This is Bloomberg.
Wall Street and experts and analysts and people like you and me probably have said for many years, Jeff Bezos doesn't really know what he's doing.
Yes.
He's not worrying about earnings. He's not paying attention to quarterly earnings distributions and so forth. In the end, he's had the last laugh. He's now one of the 2 or 3 richest men in the world, built one of the most successful companies. Underestimating him has not been a very smart thing to do. So I would say if Jeff Bezos thinks it's a pretty good idea, I suspect it probably is a pretty good idea.
Chinese bike-sharing company Mobike has raised more than $600 million in funding. The Series E round was led by internet giant Tencent. Sequoia, TPG, and Hillhouse Capital also joined the latest round. Mobike will use the funds to fuel its global expansion. The company said it plans to be in 200 cities by the end of the year. Amazon's takeover of Whole Foods Market sent shockwaves not just across the U.S., but across the pond. Investors weighed the implications for Europe's supermarkets, and shares of large European retailers sank when the news broke. Amazon has been exploring its fresh grocery delivery business in European cities like London and Berlin. Despite Whole Foods' small footprint in Europe, many feel the move raises the prospect of tougher competition and more acquisitions to come. Joining us now to discuss, Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde from London. So, Caroline, what does this mean for the European grocers?
I know, it's fascinating really because, well, Whole Foods is only really present in the UK. Why then such a fall-off in share prices across the board? If you check in on my Bloomberg, I built a little chart for you, #BTV176, which shows how much we saw a really torrid hit by the white line Tesco. Tesco was seen in the UK to be at the forefront of online. It's basically the version of Walmart here in the United Kingdom, but it is a big juggernaut of a player, really got into online early, and therefore many people feeling they would be the most exposed. Down it goes 4%. But we also saw Sainsbury, another big grocer here in the UK, in the blue line, take a hit. Look at the yellow. That actually rose. That is WM Morrison. Why? They've got a deal with Amazon already. Does that mean they're potentially a target? We heard also from Benedict Evans, who's obviously a portfolio manager over at Andreessen and Horowitz. He himself also saying, look, potentially we might see Ocado being on the block. That's another UK company, another UK online-only retailer. So he's suggesting Ocado could be next. So too the likes of London and Capital, another investment house. So there is a lot of movement going on. But actually the biggest faller of the day, Emily, in terms of retailing over in Europe was actually Ahold Delhaize. Why? Because they've got big presence in the US. Stop and Shop, Food Line. It really is at the moment the US that they think will be hit first. But it looks as though Europe's going to be hit too.
Online groceries are still just a fraction of overall grocery shopping, Caroline. What are the actual trends among European shoppers right now?
Yeah, but a fraction, but actually a bigger fraction than in the US. These sort of numbers blow my mind sometimes as to why certain countries are so much more technically adept, perhaps, in terms of their spending habits than others. And if you dig into Kantar's numbers, they actually go into who's winning the race in terms of e-commerce. South Korea leads the charge by way ahead. They've got something like 17% of all commerce is done electronically. But then actually the UK isn't far behind. They've got 7% of all their retailing, all their spending is done online. So already we're seeing that the UK is a pretty prominent buyer when it comes to online buying. They like their Amazons, they like their Tesco's, they like their online purchases. But France is about 5%. Spain then falls way off. We're about 1.7% with them. And then comes the US. you guys only spend, 1.4% of all your buying is done online. So the trends are slightly bigger in Europe, but I think it's a similar play out. There's still far more to come. And it needs companies like Amazon, which is now going to be with Whole Foods, to make it that much more addictive, that much quicker, 2-hour, 1-hour delivery. They have set the standard, and all the other grocers have to play catch up. Tesco was in front, it fell behind, and now many of them are looking to how on earth they potentially can compete, or maybe they'll be a target if they're not careful.
Speaking of targets, there's speculation Amazon could already have a grander plan in its sites in Europe. What could potential takeover targets be?
Yeah, certainly. So as Benedict Evans was analysing, maybe it'd be Ocado. That's an only online retailer here in the United Kingdom. It's interesting that Amazon, when I was in Berlin, I was over there 5 months or so ago. In fact, Berlin was seeing one of the biggest hirers out there was Amazon, particularly in the tech sector. It was really dominating the city. So I think Germany's going to have its beady eye on what they could be taking over. But I think here it's definitely WM Morrison, which is currently the only stock that basically outperformed. Why? Because they've already got a deal with Amazon. They already help provide online retailing with Amazon, provide produce for Amazon, so they could likely be a friend rather than a foe, and indeed Ocado. But at the moment it looks like Tesco, Sainsbury's, they're on the downside, but there's a lot of analysts scratching their heads looking at who could be the next one on the chopping block, and maybe it's only Tesco that wouldn't be.
All right, Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde giving us the perspective across the pond. Thanks so much, Caroline, for that context. Coming up, we examine the impact of Amazon's purchase of Whole Foods on food tech startups, how they can duel with an e-commerce giant. Next. And a feature I just want to bring to your attention, our new interactive TV function. You can find it at TV Go on the Bloomberg. You can watch us live and do any number of other things. Check it out. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. President Trump is outlining the financial health of the business assets he placed into a trust when he took office. The information comes in a new financial disclosure he made today to the Office of Government Ethics. The documents cover January 2016 through this spring, and the report shows Trump resigned from more than 500 positions, many of them a day before his inauguration. Calling it a terrible, one-sided deal, President Trump today canceled parts of former President Obama's historic agreement with Cuba. Speaking in Miami, he banned commercial dealings with Cuba's military and put new travel restrictions on U.S. citizens visiting the island.
We challenge Cuba to come to the table with a new agreement that is in the best interests of both their people and our people, and also of Cuban Americans.
While some applauded the move, Democratic opponents are taking exception.
I think this is a colossal mistake on the part of the Trump organization. None of the people making it have ever been to Cuba. They don't understand Cuba. And what they're doing is trying to fulfill a campaign tweet. Well, this is American foreign policy. It makes no sense.
British Prime Minister Theresa May has pledged over $6 million to help London Tower fire victims. That's as protesters stormed a town hall demanding new housing and financial compensation for people burned out of their homes. The death toll in Wednesday's fire has been raised now to 30. Meantime, Theresa May's government has bowed to EU demands on the first stage of Brexit talks. According to two officials, initial negotiations will focus on the terms of the UK's departure. A future trade deal will not be discussed at the same time. Brexit talks start Monday. A Moscow court has reduced jail time now for opposition leader Alexei Navalny by 5 days. He was sentenced to 30 days on Monday for instigating an unsanctioned rally. Tens of thousands took to the streets in more than 100 cities and towns across Russia in some of the most widespread protests in years after Navalny called for demonstrators to demonstrate against government corruption. Russia claims it may have killed the leader of Islamic State. The Russian Defense Ministry says it is verifying intelligence that Abu al-Baghdadi was killed late last month in a Russian airstrike near Islamic State's de facto capital in Syria. And The man who led Germany through reunification has died. Helmut Kohl was the Chancellor of Germany for 16 years. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts. I'm Elisa Parenti, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Now back to our top story. Amazon buying Whole Foods. It is a blockbuster deal that sank stocks across the grocery industry. The move has sparked chatter on how food tech and delivery startups will be impacted as well by this mega deal. And the acquisition comes just 2 weeks after meal kit delivery startup Blue Apron filed for a $100 million IPO. Joining us now to discuss, Technalysis Research President Bob O'Donnell and our Bloomberg Tech reporter Ellen Hewitt, who covers startups. Bob, I want to start with you. You've got so many different companies vying for a piece of this market. How does this Amazon Whole Foods deal change the game now?
Well, I think it dramatically reshapes everything, right? I mean, all of a sudden you've got this behemoth that comes in and makes all of these littler players all of a sudden look a lot smaller even still, right? Because you've got the ability and the reach that Amazon has. I mean, there's a lot of very interesting synergies between between Amazon and Whole Foods and what you can do. So all of a sudden, it becomes very interesting. And when you throw in the new little Amazon Wand Dash device, where you can tie that into your shopping as well. I mean, they've got a very interesting angle that changes the whole nature of how we think about groceries. I think that makes it really tough for the little guys.
Ellen, Instacart is a big competitor to Amazon Fresh, and yet they have a partnership with Whole Foods. What does this mean for Instacart?
It is super complicated for Instacart. So Whole Foods was their first national retail partner. They're actually an investor in Instacart. They've had this tight relationship for years. And then to go around and have Whole Foods all of a sudden be a subsidiary of Amazon, very complicated for Instacart. They do have 4 years left in a 5-year contract that they signed with Whole Foods.
And that contract holds?
Apparently, yes. That's what we're hearing. It's still valid, and what it does is it allows Instacart to be the exclusive delivery provider for most of Whole Foods products, both perishables and non-perishables.
There's always been a question about whether a grocery delivery startup could succeed. I mean, it goes all the way back to Webvan and that spectacular failure. Is grocery delivery just something that a big company is going to own?
I think so, and I think the fact that Amazon made the purchase that they did of a grocery store. I know you guys have been talking about Target and other places. They chose grocery first, right? That says something. And I think what that says is that groceries are a very difficult thing to do online. We were chatting beforehand. People do a lot of random purchases when they're shopping for groceries, much more so than other categories. And I think that's just the reality of how people like to shop for food. And I think that's very difficult to overcome. And of course, then obviously Amazon gets all the benefits, the real estate and all the other, warehousing and all those other kinds of things. But I do think it says something about the nature of online shopping can only go so far.
Yeah, I mean, personal story, I think I did online grocery shopping for about a year, and then I started going into the physical store, and I just had such a more pleasant experience. What does this mean, Ellen, for all of those other, whether it's Postmates or Caviar or, Blue Apron? What does it mean for those companies?
Well, I think one of the most interesting things for for Instacart is that their pitch to retail partners is often, hey, partner with us so we can provide delivery for you so that you don't get stomped out by Amazon. And in a way, Amazon buying Whole Foods may actually bolster Instacart's pitch because they can say, hey, look, Amazon is really serious about this. If you want to succeed on your own, you need to partner with a third-party delivery. So it's not just Instacart, but there are other third-party providers who could also start going to grocery stores and saying, you really need to work with us because, look, you have a huge competitor who is even more powerful now, and partnering with us may be the way to save yourself.
Bob, do you see greater consolidation across the grocery industry?
I think there has to be, right? I mean, look what the market did already today. In one day, massive change, and that clearly reflects where people think it needs to go. So yes, I think we will see some dramatic changes there. And of course, the bigger question is, how does that ripple into the general markets, into the Targets and the Walmarts and all those places as well? But clearly, I think in groceries, we're going to see some movement happen.
I wonder what it means for other tech giants. I mean, Google has its own shopping service, competing with the likes of Instacart, competing with Amazon Fresh. What does it mean for the bigger companies as well that had been just dipping their toe? Do they recede or do they jump in full throttle?
I think it's hard to imagine Google, I feel, has been pulling back a little from Google Express in the last year or two. They also used to have a partnership with Whole Foods. That has lessened a little bit. It's hard for me to imagine that this is a time when Google would think, like, yes, let's double down on doing that last mile stuff. On the other hand, like, maybe they see it as validation that this market that has traditionally not been online could still have a lot of future. I mean, it is a huge market, so the idea that it could only be Amazon's is probably not true. You will see, I think, opportunities for other big companies to make inroads.
As disruptive as this deal might be, Bob, do you think Amazon can pull it off?
It's a fair question. I mean, it's a very different animal. It's a very different business. And there have been a lot of people, when you bring together very different industries, sometimes that doesn't work as well. And the question will be, how does the philosophy of the company, the management, I know you guys were talking about that, how does that impact it? But I think Amazon sees this as being critically important because they can also use it to try these ideas they've had about retail, right? So I think this also becomes an interesting experiment for them in order to figure out how to try and move forward.
Do you see Amazon pushing further into clothing?
I think clothing is right. I mean, if you think about things that people like to see and touch, it's food and clothing. Those are kind of the sort of things that people generally want to be able to physically interact with. And that's just very hard to replicate online.
Ellen, what's the day two story?
I think it's just looking at how we might continue to see like the growth of this online. I mean, people continue to talk about how little really we talk about e-commerce all the time, right, but so little of our spending continues to be done online. And I think if there's a way that Amazon could make this very in-person, and you've talked about it yourself, this very hands-on physical process, something that's more technologically streamlined, I mean, that's a huge change in how we would be buying a lot of our things.
All right, our Bloomberg Tech reporter Ellen Hewitt, Bob O'Donnell of Technalysis. Always great to have you both. Thank you so much for stopping by. Coming up, one Amazon competitor says it'll take the company about 5 to 10 years to catch up with the traditional grocery landscape. We will hear from the CEO of the online grocery delivery startup Boxed next. This is Bloomberg. How do you walk that line
when you're in the middle of a crisis situation?
It's really all about enabling people. Technology needs to serve everyone. But at the end of the day, it's all about emotional decision.
I think there's huge innovation left in music.
The hallmark of a truly great leader is that great is never great enough.
For us, it's not about being first, it's about being the best.
Apple has hired Sony's Breaking Bad team as part of its push into TV. The two former Sony Pictures presidents help the company take advantage of the demand for high-quality series spurred by streaming services like Netflix. The move is seen as further proof Apple plans to develop its own exclusive video to prevent customers from being lured away. The company has also been testing documentaries and reality shows through its Apple Music subscription service. Back to the story we've been covering all day, Amazon to buy Whole Foods. It is a move that has investors excited and competitors a bit worried. Che Huang, founder and CEO of Boxed, an e-commerce retailer selling bulk items via its app or website, joined Bloomberg Markets earlier today to talk about what the deal means for his company.
What a time to be alive in this industry. I remember starting our company 4 years ago and going up and down kind of the gates of Stanford and saying, like, you know what, grocery is going to change. And I remember a lot of those venture capitalists, a lot of the companies out there said, you know what, 1998 called, they want their business model back. Grocery was, it tried to be disrupted back in 98, 99, didn't come, so it's not going to happen. And today, 4 years later, it's a little bit of vindication that it's happening. So we put in that hard work. We sell the large format of items, so we're more of a competitor to Costco, BJ's, or Sam's Club. But at the end of the day, we put in 4 years of hard work to make that playbook, and all those grocers that you see like down 7, down 8, down 10% today, when you think about what they should have invested in technology throughout the last 4 years, they're forced to now. But after having all that money that they should have invested into technology get taken away by the market in 1 day of trading.
So you were looking at the right crystal ball at that point when you started to say, hey, this is how we're going to invest. Fast forward 2 years. what does the grocery landscape look like? Because investors today are saying, ouch.
Game changer. I mean, like if you just go on these earnings calls for all these traditional brick and mortar retailers, the one storyline that they had was that, you know what, Amazon can't replicate the fact that we spent billions of dollars building a grocer on every single street corner.
Right.
And so when they come up for their earnings calls, over the next 30, 60, 90 days, I really wonder what that narrative is going to be going forward.
For Amazon, what does this do for them? Kind of what gaps does this fill at Amazon, which already had a fresh business, right, a grocery business, but it was small, especially small for considering Amazon's size?
Yeah, I think I would say two main things. I would say there's a gap and a functional component when it comes to just the financial metrics. I think on one hand, it gives them a fresh fulfillment center in towns all across the U.S. And so that's absolutely just one. From a financial perspective, I think if you look at all the different grocers that were already under pressure, this might be the final death knell that puts them into a real tailspin. I don't know if it was engineered like that, but it's certainly from the outside in, if you look at the board today, it certainly looks that way.
That they could completely dominate.
Yeah, I'm curious though about then accessibility, right? If you're living in a small town in America, you got your Kroger, you got whatever local grocery you have. I mean, does this affect your access to fresh food?
So I think that's the core of why I think it doesn't affect our business as much, because our business are for folks who don't have the physical means, the time, or the patience to get to a warehouse club, and warehouse clubs are only available in about 400 different towns across, or just a few hundred different towns across America. So it doesn't affect us as much. For that kind of countryside consumer, maybe not today, but that playbook that's basically been usurped by Amazon can now be replicated across many towns across the country.
What is it that they see in food beyond the fact that there's a revenue stream? Is this about the data that they get? Because if you look at the kind of subset of customers that Amazon go to and the customer subset that you've got in Whole Foods, particularly to go back to the point that they're not changing the CEO, they see value here surely beyond food.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned that crystal ball that we saw 4 years ago. It wasn't like we're like, wow, this one's really interesting, it's small, but it was the biggest freaking crystal ball we can find. If you look at, it's $1 trillion market with virtually 0% mobile penetration. But at the end of the day, though, I harken back to what we felt was this race going on and currently going on. It's will technology folks figure out retail faster than the retailers and the grocers figure out technology. And so at the end of the day, both were running up pretty slow, but now Amazon took a hell of a shortcut.
But there are challenges in fresh food, right? You guys don't sell fresh food.
Yeah, so we're doing a small test in certain locations, but for the most part, we're not.
It's a tricky thing, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, what is Amazon going to have to address? What are these challenges if it's going to be selling more fresh food?
Yeah, so are they just going to use these as fulfillment centers so that there's availability within a 15 to 20 mile radius? Or will they truly use the distribution network, one step behind the stores, and use that cold chain logistics to actually power Amazon Fresh so that they can have an even bigger network? Because right now, building those systems and learning that playbook is really slow and really expensive, but now they have access to it.
Because this is an acceptance that the online model that they've made so potent doesn't work for food, that people want to go and see food, they want to touch food, fine. Do you think they add to the stores beyond this, or do you think this fulfills that mandate?
I think they'll start adding to the stores. Yeah. I mean, the last thought that I had was that, when it comes down to it, you look at how, we built this business over 4 years of hard work, moving at the speed of a nimble, fast company. And so if you're a traditional grocer today, you're looking around, you're probably thinking, what do I do? You're probably calling McKinsey or BCG to figure out what we should do. You're figuring out who's going to make the slide deck to present to the CEO. And so thinking that they have to replicate the playbook that we've written over the last 4 years, moving at their speed, it might be 5 or 10 years before they truly catch up.
Che Huang, founder and CEO of Boxed, on Bloomberg Markets earlier. Coming up, we will dig deeper into this Whole Foods mega deal and why Amazon is dipping its toes into the massive $795 billion food and beverage industry. This is Bloomberg. Another bit of deal news announced today. Airbnb is purchasing background check startup Truly in an effort to protect its guests and hosts from bad actors. By analyzing data from public records, social media, and other sources, Truly's tech could help Airbnb track various customer violations, such as side deals between guests and hosts. The home-sharing startup has struggled with fraudulent listings and guests who sidestep paying fees by contacting hosts directly. Valued at about $31 billion, Airbnb has more than 3 million home and apartment rental listings and is expanding into new product categories, including travel experiences. Back now to Amazon and Whole Foods, our biggest story of the day. Earlier on Bloomberg, Carlyle Group CEO David Rubenstein talked about how this deal will disrupt the grocery industry.
When Jeff Bezos makes a move or Amazon makes a move, it makes the whole world pay attention because they are the largest online retailer and the world is moving towards online sales. So if the food world were to go this way, and there's no evidence that it can be done that quickly, but if the food world goes this way, it will clearly change the way people shop.
Let's dig into why Jeff Bezos is now taking the full plunge into the grocery industry with Bloomberg Gadfly's Shira Ovide. Shira, you've got a new piece out today talking about the behavior of grocery shopping, that it mostly still resides offline. And I wonder, is that what it's going to be for the long term? Is this just something people want to do in person?
I think it's too early to tell whether shopping for groceries is going to be online or in physical stores. And to me, Amazon spending almost $14 billion on Whole Foods is a sign that they believe, at least for the near term, that the 98% of grocery shopping that happens in stores is going to continue happening in stores, and that Amazon needs to have a significant play in physical locations in order to capture a significant share of that market.
One of the big question marks that still remains here is the actual strategy. How will the customer experience change in the store when I walk into a Whole Foods? What will be different now that Amazon is an owner? What do you think?
So the interesting thing, our colleague Spencer Soper had a story that just published in the last 20 minutes or so. And one of the things it mentioned is the possibility of Amazon incorporating some of this kind of cashierless technology that it has been testing at a convenience store near its Seattle headquarters, Amazon Go store, that basically allows people to grab food off the shelves and walk out without paying, and it automatically kind of charges your Amazon account. And so there's a possibility they could use Whole Foods locations as a place to kind of test that further. And you can imagine, Whole Foods has a large private label business, which is something that Amazon's been very interested in many categories. And again, that could be an interesting area for Amazon to sort of cut costs, basically, at a traditionally low margin grocery chain.
What about prices? Whole Foods is known for having premium products and premium prices. Amazon is known for having the lowest priced. Will we see prices come down in the stores?
I mean, look, you saw what happened to the rest of the supermarket industry today. Everybody's stock fell, and that is a bet that Amazon is going to be willing to cut prices and take losses if it needs to, if it believes its end goal is to win market share in grocery, which is one of the last categories untouched by e-commerce.
That said, is that a sustainable model?
I don't know. It's a fair question, right? The interesting thing about Amazon's e-commerce operation is that very often right now, Amazon is not the low-cost player. It doesn't have to be the low-cost player anymore because they have you hooked with Prime. You automatically shop on Amazon because it's easy, and that's how they've hooked people. They lure you in with the allure of low prices for a while, and then they keep you there because they have their hooks in you, and it's a habit. So if they can do the same thing in grocery, that's another multi-billion-dollar windfall for Amazon.
Shira, you take a look at the sort of big tectonic shifts happening between the big tech giants, whether it's Facebook or Google or Apple. How does this position Amazon now in the race against the biggest and most innovative, quote-unquote, companies in the world?
As far as I can see, Amazon is the only one of the big tech giants that's really making a play in food and beverage. That Google has this program, Google Express, that does kind of retail store deliveries and things like that. It is not done very well. So this is a category, unlike almost anything else that Amazon is in, where it has relatively little competition, at least from the giant tech companies.
and a $795 billion business. Bloomberg gadfly Shira Ovide. Check out Shira's piece at Bloomberg.com. Shira, thanks so much for joining us. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We've got you covered on every angle of this Amazon Whole Foods deal. Do not miss a special edition of Bloomberg Studio 1.0 this weekend for my full conversation with Apple CEO Tim Cook, airing 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, right here on Bloomberg Television.